Hi.
Kia ora, Auntie Fee. I mean, not that you need an introduction, but could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Phylesha Brown-Acton.
Yay! So let's get into it. So, Auntie Fee, where did you grow up?
Where did I grow up? I grew up in Tamaki Makaurau in Auckland. I was born in St. Helens Hospital in 1976. So very central. Spent my very early years in Devonport and Birkenhead.
Devon,
Yeah.
Northie.
Yes,
Oh.
on the North Shore. And then came back around at the age of 5, and back and forth between my father and my mother because they had separated at that stage. And my mother lived in Morningside on the formidable Doncroot Street, which is notorious for being the central South Auckland. And yeah, that's kind of where I grew up.
So, growing up through your childhood, where was it? Was the point where you may have thought of yourself as being different to the other children that were around you? When did that start happening?
So my first experience, just before coming back to Central, I started school at Onipoto Primary School in Northcote. I'm a Tona Street child, just down the road from the notorious Cadna Street. And on my first day of school, I was in a classroom and playtime came about. And that's kind of the time that all the kiddies want to go to the bathroom before they just run out onto the field or jungle gym and do their thing. And I remember distinctly arriving at the toilet, being confronted by the fact that boys were going to one side and girls were going to the other side because there were separate toilets. And, you know, I'm a kid that just came from a home that has one toilet. Everybody uses the same bathroom.
Yeah.
Mum, dad, siblings, brothers, sisters. So I kind of thought, oh, I'll just follow the girls because I'm a girl. And in that very moment of following the girls and getting to the point where I was going to and you know, teachers are always standing around during these playtime scenarios, and she grabbed me by the scuff of my collar and yanked me back and said, "You don't go in there, you're not a girl, you're a boy," and ushered me to go. And I was distraught. I refused to go to the toilet. I was screaming, and my mother had to come and get me from school. And so my first week of primary school was spent at home because I don't know if I would say traumatized, because I eventually got over it. But that's kind of the first inklings in my mind as a kid that I started to recognize that how I felt inside was not necessarily how people viewed me externally. And I wasn't socialized in the home as being, you are a little boy. Like, my mother used to do things like she would grow my hair, and being a Niuean child, that's what they do with all their little boy kids, is grow their hair long. So she would grow them and put them in pigtails, and she would always get comments from people saying, "Oh, you have a little pretty daughter," and my mother would laugh about it. And it was at that point, my mother, she had 2 daughters, she had 3 sons, and then she had me, and then 2 younger brothers after me. So I think it was kind of my mother's yearning, like, I'm tired of boys.
I need another daughter.
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the earliest memory. And then the other part after that, I had a girlfriend that lived across the road, and her name was Natasha. And she had a beautiful backyard in their home, and the parents, like, they were fascinated with, like, oriental gardens. So they had koi ponds, and they had a little bridge going over the pond. And her and myself sat on the bridge, and I remember her saying, "You show me yours, I'll show you mine," kind of thing. We're like 5 years old.
Yeah.
And I remember distinctly going, "Okay, show me yours," and she showed me her. And I screamed. I ran home screaming, crying, and said to my mother, "She's got a monster. She's got a monster," because I thought what I had was what girls had. And so yeah, it's just, as I remember as a little kid, those are prominent memories of kind of battling in my head around this concept of maybe what gender was and how I felt versus what people were telling me I was,
Yeah.
which kind of was quite conflicting as a young kid.
Yeah. Growing up with that confusion within yourself and going through school, how did school help? Did it help? Was there a dialogue back then that they could use to support you through that, or were you kind of just having to suffer it alone?
Yeah, I mean, you know, back then nobody knew what a trans child was. Like, the word wasn't even used. I think the terms of those days were very kind of centered in terminologies from the adult pornographic industry, because that's predominantly where you saw, not that I saw as a kid, that kind of stuff, but just reflecting on that, that's kind of what people knew those terms to be. So growing up in school, no, there was no concept of ever hearing what trans was, or even understanding myself, because I never saw my reflection in anyone else. There was no one around my peripheral, within my immediate family, within my immediate communal settings or community that looked like me. And if there were, it was often people referring to me as you're queer, you're a pufta, you're gay. And so as a young kid, trying to sort of battle with finding myself, I was constantly being labelled as a gay boy, which didn't fit with me, you know. And it's kind of like that constant internalizing where you at some point might feel like there is this type of dysphoria or disconnect between what you're feeling within your thoughts, within your emotions, is not connected with your genitalia. So school never helped in that sense, because they're just like, oh my gosh, what the hell is this? Do we put it with the gays, or do we put it with the girls, or do we? So in school, it was quite. I think my best schooling years were primary school. When I came back over to the city, I went to Mount Albert Primary School. Had the best time because lots of my cousins and neighbours went to the same school. So it was
That's
just like,
so great.
yeah,
like, because when I was with my family before we moved away, I always knew I had older cousins there. So whenever I got picked on, I'd go run and cry to them. It's always good to have a support unit.
I agree. And it's just like, and also the common interest, like you take what you're doing and playing in the neighbourhood into school, and it's kind of like the same thing, other than that you got teachers. And then intermediate was really cool as well. I went to Kōwhai Intermediate School, and then from Kōwhai I went to Mount Albert Grammar School. And back in those days, I never used to say I went to Mags, but I'm happy to say that I went to Mags because it's now a co-ed school rather than a single-sex school. And that's when I had older brother at school, and that was a great thing. But again, the same thing with teachers, the school itself, just not understanding. And so it became, from being immersed in being surrounded, and I say why primary school and intermediate were cool is because, you know, all of us kids from the same neighbourhood, family members went to the same school. But when you got to college, most of them, all your close friends, they went to Auckland Girls Grammar School, and you had to go to another school, and so you ended up being with a whole lot more people who seemed foreign to you. So that was kind of the journey. It was just never, school was never, it got from a place of just being amazing to kind of then feeling like quite isolated and lonely. And I started to wag school a lot because I didn't feel like school was an accepting or affirming place, in particular high school. And this is when I started to kind of go through the paces of trying to find an identity of myself. And I think it was also conflicting because on one side, I was immersed in this beautiful culture, being Niuean and being raised in the church and in the community house and amongst my elders, and culture was a strong component of my upbringing.
Yeah.
Then conflicting and trying to find this other type of identity or to fit in because nobody knew who I was. I kind of battled with that as well because that identity didn't fit within my cultural framework.
Yeah.
But I knew
Yeah.
it was important for me to kind of understand because I wasn't like my brothers, but I wasn't like my sisters.
Yeah.
And so it was just always that the tensions or the nuances of trying to find where my standings, where I stood or affirmed myself in a positive way.
Yeah. You speak of how your mother brought you up almost to be as if you were her daughter. How did your siblings, how did the outer family embrace you?
Well, I mean, my mother's a very, you'll meet my mother through this process, and my mother's a very strong, very formidable leader among my people, but she's also a very quiet, very coy, shy person amongst people that she's not familiar with. So in my home upbringing, my mother's golden child was not myself. I was the black sheep, so she was constantly battling with managing my older brothers who were not necessarily kind to me, and her appeasing them versus also trying to protect me. So I was passed around from my mum to my great aunt, my grandfather's sister, from my grandfather's sister to my mother's older brother.
Yeah.
And that kind of became my upbringing as a child, sort of being passed because nobody kind of understood me. And it wasn't because I was problematic. It was because I just wasn't like all the other children. Because there were tensions amongst other family members who would either beat me or would say unkind things about me, I did have elders who, like my mother, just wanted the best for me and just thought by passing me from one family to another that eventually I'd find a space that was safe and embracing for me. But yeah, that wasn't the case. And so I would always gravitate back towards my mum. And, you know, I'm very thankful for the lessons that I've learned from my mother along the way because she allowed me the freedom that probably a lot of young people have today to just go out there and do whatever it is I wanted to do. And her main advice to me was just learn from your mistakes, don't make the same mistake twice. And I took that very seriously. So, you know, I was really lucky that if I wanted to go out and hang out with my friends or, you know, wag or go to town, I didn't need to ask permission. I'd just write the letter myself and forge a signature. And But that's the relationship I had with my mum. She just knew that if she just left me to be and to just go on explore my own journey, as long as I knew that I could always come back to her to seek advice, to just, you know, the comfort or the love that I required, that she would be there for that. And I think that was all that I needed, because I just ran with it and just went out on the streets and hung out with people and found myself. And eventually that's where it progressed to me kind of falling into the dance life and being a performer and connecting with people like myself and ending up in the nightclub scene, because that's eventually where I found my community.
Was there any like defining moment that like helped you get onto the path that you were on as a child for your own identity? Or was it like hallelujah, or was it just reaffirming for yourself?
No, I think there was at one particular point, I remember at my great aunt's house, and there's dial telephones back in the days.
The best phones ever.
And these houses, because they're big, old houses, they would always have a hallway, and in that hallway there would always be a phone, because that's where phones were always connected. So it was kind of like a quiet place, and it was away from other parts of the house. And I remember we used to get this, the local newspaper, like the Central Leader type thing, but I don't know if it was called that back in the days. And at the back of it, I remember looking in the personals, because I worked out, as a kid, that if you looked through the personals, there'd be, adverts. And I was only young. I think it was intermediate type school. It definitely wasn't. It was before college. And I remember looking, and I remember seeing an advert for gay massage. And I looked, and I thought, oh, okay, everyone's telling me that I'm gay. And so I called this number, and I would just constantly ring the number, but not say anything, and then hang up. And every time this man would answer it, and then I just went through this scenario after days and days and days of ringing it, and then just like breathing on the phone. And I felt sorry for this, as an adult, probably thinking to myself, gosh, I wonder what he like. Eventually, anyway, in the end, he said, because I kind of just howled on the phone, and he was just like, hi, my name's Lance, I know you're the same person that keeps calling and hanging up, like, is there anything I can do to support? Here to talk to you. So then I started talking to this elderly gay man. I don't know what ethnicity he was, other than the fact that his name was Lance. And then what came to it was, eventually he wanted to meet me publicly. And for me, I kind of got a bit like, oh my gosh, no. But I think it was, the reason why I tell this story is that I think it's my first moment in time where I got to a point where I worried that I would never find support, because nobody could provide me with, or there was no level of understanding. There was constantly people shouting at me saying, you're a pufta, you're a queer, you're gay. And, in my head, I was just constantly like, I know that's not what I am. Once I started to realize what gay was, I was just like, no, I'm not a boy. I'm not, like, I'm this image. And back to my mother, every Mother's Day I would paint these, I would get any plywood that may have been hanging around the house, or an old door that fell off the cupboard, and I'd cover it in paint, and then I'd paint the most beautiful depiction of like a Tahitian dancer, or covered in flowers with beautiful long hair. And for me, that image that I constantly painted, and I'm not the greatest artist, but I used to think, and I got quite creative with it, and I would do it every Mother's Day as a Mother's Day present for my mother, because for me, that depiction of femininity and that beauty of womanhood was the example that I saw in my mum. And so for me, when all these people were saying to me, you're gay, boy, I'm just like, no, I'm beautiful like my mum. That's who I am. Like, my mother's like probably the first, like, I often say that my whawhawhine sisters, when I saw them in netball, were the first true reflection of me seeing myself in another person, when in actual fact my mother was the first person that I saw my reflection in, of what I wanted to be or how I felt.
That's so true, because all young girls always watch mum apply the lipstick, put on
High
the
heels.
makeup. They're the ones with the heels.
That's right.
They're the ones that they're our first, I guess, vessel into seeing what we could be potentially.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that kind of resonated with me not wanting to meet Lance, because I was just like, no, I'm not a gay boy. No, I don't want to meet you. I've done this the wrong way. And so for me, that was my one moment in time, or the defining moment for me, that I just said, I'm just going to reflect myself in the image of my mother. And that's the stepping stones to kind of where Phylesha's journey started. The one promise I made to myself from that moment on, though, was that my commitment in life would be to ensure that no other young person who was trying to find themselves would have to look in a newspaper in a personal ad, probably looking for support in the wrong area, as much as Lance probably had the best intentions of providing me with support. unknown to me what type of support, but that they wouldn't have to continue searching for it, that there would be something out there.
Yeah.
Probably hence why I do what I do today.
Yeah, I was just about to say, does this lead into all the advocacy that you do?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Can we speak to those women that you saw playing netball?
Yeah.
Like you said, they were also another image of somebody that you could potentially be. Do you still keep in touch with these people? Are they still quite prominent figures in your life?
Absolutely. So because I grew up in the central Auckland area, we eventually shifted from Doncroot to Western Springs Road to then Great South Road on the rise, the hill that goes from Western...
You are Auckland, aren't you?
From Western Springs up to Great Surrey Crescent shops.
Yeah.
And so my mum had sent me up the road to go to get something from the shop, and then when I came back down, I could hear the whistle blowing in the background, and it was coming from Greyland Primary School. So I kind of thought, oh, there's a footpath that goes up from Great South Road. So I walked up, and then I sort of stood there and I watched these beautiful, what I described as gazelles prancing on the netball court. They were athletic, they were golden, they were coloured, they were, huge buns in their hair, and some had long plaits, and they were just passing the ball from one person to another and over the back of their heads, and it was so fast, so beautifully choreographed. It was like a symphony of gazelles just going from one end to the other, and all competing to protect the ball. And then when that ball was shot in the goal, I was just like, wow, these women are amazing. And I stood from afar, kind of back on the bank, and then just sat down and watched. And then in the midst of the breaks, it was very obvious that I was a very feminine individual, and I kind of sat there, and one of the girls just said, "Hi, sister." I'm like, hi. And they're like, come. And then I kind of went over, and then that's when I realised, because some of them had the baho and, facial hair and whatnot. And I realised it's just like, wow, these women are just like me.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like seeing, the first reflection of myself in another individual as a trans person.
Yeah.
And, as life is to a number of trans people, it can be quite cruel. And so some of them have passed on. That's the reality. I grew up within a couple of generations before me in my generation, that you're lucky to live to the age of 30 if you're a trans woman, in particular if you're a Māori or Pacifica trans woman.
Yeah.
So I grew up with that, knowing very well that it was hard to live in that being of being a Māori or Pacifica trans person.
Yeah.
But yes, some of them I'm still very close with. Barbara, who's one of my longest standing whakawhine friends, who was one of the sisters playing netball that day. She lives in Sava'i at the moment in Samoa, so she's still about. I just recently, in October last year, went and spent a week with her in Sava'i, and we hung out and just caught up on the old days. So yeah, she's still very prominent, but I always paid respects to my whakawhine sisters, because they kind of provided me with that sense of community, that sense of identity, those foundations to same in terms of our own journeys, our own dreams and aspirations as trans-identifying women. But again, that whole thing around trans, like that word, again, I'm using it very openly through this discussion, but they're not words that we used back then. Whakawhine, whakawhiwhine, leiti, those are the words that we referred to in terms of identifying ourselves with. It wasn't until in my mid-20s that we probably started to be recognised or labelled, not recognised, labelled more so with words transsexual, and then as transsexual and then many iterations of that started to progress, we arrived at the trans community or transgender. But yeah, they're very still a prominent. I returned to Samoa, to Tonga. I lived in Tonga for 5 years. I've been involved in the beauty pageant scene. I've been involved in the netball scene, in the human rights space, which still involves a whole number of them today, where we still currently just keep fighting, but we still have the best of times when we come together. And again, it's kind of like that sense of community and family away from home.
So were they your source of information on beginning the transition process? Were they able to provide you with the next steps to start moving onwards in the path?
I mean, it's still a thing today. Like, your first moments of your first experience, well, for most Pacifico trans identifying people, is, we call it the black market of knowledge. Because it's through your peers, it's through you're not going to go into the internet and search up something unless somebody else has been there, because your first point to go back and say, hey, have you heard about so and so? And so it's that organic support network that you go to first to ask advice. And if you're considering a surgical procedure, you're not just going to go and book it and go to the very first person that you find. You're going to go and ask, and you're going to be advised, and you're going to be told, and like, that's very much a part of the support process. So yes, that was always my first point of contact when wanting to seek support, seek information. And it's just a very organic way in which we pass on knowledge to each other, peer support, and it's a trusted way rather than looking to other alternatives. And again, you're not going to put yourself in a predicament if you're going to go and see somebody if you know they're not trans friendly. And that's, safety is a huge aspect of why you would go to these individuals to ask things and to seek support from. Because there's still doctors around out there that are still telling you that that's not a good thing to do. No, and then the pathologization, but I can't even say that word. Pathologization. You did well. Pathologization of trans bodies is a very there was a thing back then. Like, you had to see a psychologist in order to and it's still a thing today actually, in order to be deemed safe for taking hormones or for accessing hormones. Now you don't have to see a psychologist, but you still have to see a counsellor to deem you fit to start taking hormones. It's the same thing with seeing, gender affirming surgeries. It's still the same thing. You still have to get the tick from somebody else. So that whole process, you're not going to go to a psychologist or a counsellor who's not very supportive, or will grill you to the point you feel like you're not trans anymore. All these types of conservative practices or practitioners did make it problematic for a number of trans people. So again, the only people we could lean to get insights or seek support from were our very own sisters, or trans aunties, or trans mothers. So what happened once you were living your life as a trans person? I don't know. You just got on with things? I mean, I don't know if I made an affirming... Well, actually, I remember I used to be quite prominent in going to the gym quite a bit, and I got involved in hanging out with the aerobics instructor scene. And one of my cool friends back in the days was Lisa Drakovich, who's still around today, and she's still the fitness freak that she is. So I used to go along with her to do some of her classes and just jump up on stage with her. And I remember hanging out at her place, and Mike Beban, they all decided that they were going to put makeup on me for the first time. And it's kind of like my first moment where I kind of, and then I had no high heels. I remember just wearing this cutout tube material that we wore in the Mikahaka show for the 1993 Hero March, which was the last march down Queen Street. And we performed at the Princess Wharf in this big number for Mika's Lava Lava song. So I wore that dress, and I remember tying, because I didn't have very long hair back then, so I tied a Lava Lava in my hair and made it like a turban. Very Patrick Star. And then I went to a nightclub with them, and I remember dancing on the nightclub, and then I turned around, and my first cousin, she was standing there at the nightclub, and obviously she shouldn't have recognized me because they did my makeup very draggy. And I remember just looking at her, turning straight back, and then I was like shimmied, and then I left and then took off home. That was kind of my first moment. Why was I talking about that? Because your question was...
My question was, what happened once you were living your life?
Oh yeah, so that's kind of the first defining moment where I kind of felt like I was stepping into... from that moment, and then I questioned myself. But that's the only time that I felt that I questioned myself, and then from there I was like, you know what, fuck it.
Yeah.
I'm moving on. I'm not going to have anyone stare at me and look at me. But she obviously didn't recognize me. But it was that notion of feeling like I had to hide myself, that I was just like, no, I'm not going to do that ever again. I've already found people like me. I already have been through that process of, as a young kid, trying to find support. I know that I'm loved. I know that I'm supported by my mum and my family. I'm affirmed within my culture. I've come this far, not to just go back and hide. And that's why this whole concept of coming out of the closet is very foreign to me.
Yeah.
Because even though that was a defining moment to me, some people said, oh, but that was your coming out of the closet. And I said, no, we don't have houses that have closets. It's often closets were used to hide away food and what have you not keep, skeletons and what have you not in there. And the only thing that I should have ever come out of and recognize that is coming out of my mum. That's my coming out. Because that's how I was born. That's exactly and that's true. Recognizing it. You're born this way. It's not anything that socialized you or made you this way. Because I've had so many people over the years say to me, is there anything traumatic that happened to you? Were you sexually abused, hence why you are the way you are today? Like, people ask those questions.
Yeah.
Quite shockingly. But yeah, for me, that was the defining moment to be just like, and from then on, I was just like, I'm living my life without any apology, without any fear of feeling that I need to hide who I am. And I understand that not everybody has the same strength or courage to move through life that way, because again, it's contextual. Not every story is the same. Similar but not the same. So there are circumstances that stop people from transitioning from a very early age to the point where they can only transition at an older age. And that's understandable for so many reasons. That was kind of my defining moment to be like, no, I'm going to continue. And from that moment on, that's Phylesha's journey, where I affirmed that Phylesha was going to be Phylesha. My mum helped me pick my name. Even half the time she can't remember the conversation. But it was from that moment on that Phylesha was Phylesha, and I never looked back. It
shows, because you're such a prominent figure in the beauty pageants of the time. So with that mana that you bring, it's no wonder you won all the time.
And funnily enough, that nightclub that I saw my cousin at, was the nightclub that I eventually went and competed in the beauty pageant, the Miss Lepenina nightclub, and I won it. So it was kind of like this again. Oh my gosh, it's the first place that I ever did drag, using drag as the concept of putting on makeup and a dress and going out there, and then I eventually came back years later and won the beauty pageant.
Winner.
and just again, that whole thing about beauty pageants, I think often society tries to dictate beauty standards or determines beauty pageant platforms are either good or not good. But for me, I think it was a really life-saving platform. That whole process of being involved in the beauty pageant was really empowering for me. And just, I want to acknowledge, those things as really affirming. That platform has been very affirming, because if I don't think I had the beauty pageant element within my life, maybe I wouldn't be as confident as I am today, or as I don't know, put together in terms of my coordination, because beauty pageants really helped me. Like, if you're going to do this, there's only one way to do it, and to do it bloody well. And I think that applies in everything that I do in life. Don't just do it half-heartedly, do it good. Just like how you serve people. You don't go into people's homes, or you don't go somebody that comes to see you if they're seeking support. You don't just offer them, half-hearted support. You want to give them full support and everything. So I use beauty pageants as an example of recognizing that in my service over many years, and a tribute to that, not only to my mother and my grandmother, but also that as a platform that supported me in recognizing how important it is to work hard and to do things well.
I feel, just from everything that you've said, just the spirit that you hold and the temperament that you've had to hold over the years really geared you up for those. So I feel like it was just a given.
I agree. I always talk about the spirit that guides you, and I don't know whether it's something or other, but I keep saying to people, if you recognize that you feel that something's taking you somewhere, and then pulling you away from it, and then go with it. Don't pull against it. Just recognize that there's something that guides you through this. So it's no surprise, because every time I've tried to leave my work to go and make money, buying this house eventually didn't come as a result of getting paid, really, really well. It's come of many years of sacrifice, but if COVID didn't happen, then that would never be a thing. It's just standing true to what it is and doing the hard work. I forgot what the question was. I'm
trying to fly, and I want to just chuck this away. But I'll just go back so we hit some points. So I'm paraphrasing, but the one thing I love that you say, because it resonates so much with me and my cultural identity, is that your culture comes before the label of trans. And I just think that's such a beautiful statement, because it's so accurate. We are who we come from, and thank you. I read that, I mean, it was a buzzer that just went, okay, that is so accurate, and the thing I've been trying to figure out by how do I label myself, even though we shouldn't be labeling ourselves, but how did you come to that?
Well, I think a big part of it is understanding my genealogy. In Niue we call it matohianga, which means the equivalent to whakapapa for Māori. So genealogy is a key element of everybody. Understanding where you descended from is your foundation to everything that you came into this world as, and will be moving forward. Even though you might choose to take a career path here, or socialize yourself in a space like this, it never takes away from the fact that your genealogy changes. And I think this is the concept of also understanding that there's nothing in your culture that condones any one of your kin or any one of your people or any one of your family ever severing that tie to your bloodlines. So for me, recognizing that and seeing my grandmother as a pillar and an amazing example of strong representation of a woman who was selfless, who provided service to so many, who was such a strong leader, my grandmother was the first woman elected from our village to Parliament in Niue. And then seeing through my mother, her leadership in our women's cricket team, who I play for now, as she's retired, but she took that team to 16 years consecutive champions. So those things and those connections to my grandmother and my mother, but also my family, my bloodlines, like they're lifelong connections. They're not things that you you have friends that come and go, you have people that come and go in your life who you lose eventually, just like family members. But that genealogy of all of those people means something to you. And again, your culture is your foundation. Those are the things that you were birthed upon. And it recognizes also your ancestors. It acknowledges you living in the now and the today, and it also acknowledges the future generations of your people to come. So for me, at the forefront, that is always the most important aspect of who I am. Before I am anything, I am tangata niue. That's who I am first and foremost. And unfortunately, Western teachings often try to single you out or treat you as an individual, but we come from collective communities. We come from collective aspirations. We come from that concept of it takes a village to raise a child, because it's absolutely true. So again, when often people label me that I am a transgender woman, I am a transgender activist, those things in themselves mean something to the person that's prescribing it to you. But for me, it's not necessarily the first thing that I am. And I often remind people of that. I'm tangata niue. I am the child of my mother. I am the sibling of my brothers and sisters. I am the auntie of my nieces and nephews. So those things are first. I am the mother of Milo, my little dog.
He'll be making us cries. He's crying us,
and then I am, all these other things that come after that. And, it's important for me not to ever disrespect my culture, my language, my ancestors, my family. And that's why it's important for me to always acknowledge them at the forefront and to make that connection and to signify my positionality with the identity first before I start to recognize other things. Because if I constantly put at the forefront, I am Phylesha, I am a trans woman, that doesn't, that is a disrespectful way, I feel, of recognizing, first and foremost, where I come from and the genealogy that I stem from and descend from. But again, everybody's understanding of how they identify themselves or where they affirm themselves is different from mine. That's just what I know it to be.
I love the approach that you take.
Sorry to interrupt, and you're doing so beautifully. You're just a natural. So good.
Beautiful.
You can answer radio stuff, but has your culture reciprocated this respect that you called to it? Like, can you explain what you get back?
So if so often people, like, out in the Western context, I'm a revered transgender leader who advocates for so much. I'm classed as a rainbow activist, a human rights defender. So within that realm of my professional, and I call it my professional life because it's all I know to be, it's what I've set my foundations up, my career pathways as being, not by choice, but because community keep pulling me back. And I'd like to think that I'm particularly good at doing that. But on the flip side of that, everybody expects, when I have this conversation with them, that they expect me to be the same leader amongst my people, within my culture, but I'm not. I'm not the language knowledge holder. I'm not the cultural expert amongst my Niuean people. I have first cousins and who are born and raised to and taught those things.
Yeah.
My role is to do the cleaning, to be the cook,
Yeah.
you know, and it's a balance. So I on the flip side like to see my culture as a very grounding process, or in my life it's something that contributes to ensuring that when I'm out there and people like, because you know when you do this where people like to put you on a platform, not that I ask for that to be a thing, and often you can get away with the clouds and your head get quite big and what have you not. So I respect always returning back to be amongst my people and to be that cook and to be that cleaner, because that in itself is an important role, but it also allows me to remind myself that you need to be grounded in having this balance of hierarchy versus being, you know, just in a submissive, not that that's probably a good example, a dominant submissive, but you know, it's I feel that I'm affirmed in my culture just by simply being of service to my people in those particular roles, and it's a good balance for me.
It's almost like when you go to Marae, it's almost
Yeah.
expected. You're in the kitchen,
And there are
you're peeling
people
the
that are
potatoes.
born with those leadership things
Yeah.
amongst my people and not. And I think there's this misconception amongst specific cultures that they confuse religion and culture as the same thing. And often it does get quite confused. It does get played out like they are the same thing, but religion is probably not necessarily the affirming aspect of who I am. It hasn't been the most affirming. It has provided me at some points some joy, but at the same time also huge pain. Whereas my culture has never ever. It's always kept me grounded. It's always held me accountable. It's always made me the most, you know, transparent in terms of you didn't clean the you can't hide if you didn't do a good job doing the cleaning, or you know, and it's just that process of just knowing that, you know, you've got this hierarchy or this balance or this thing that's just it's embraced and supported, and I find love in that. And of course culture is a very affirming aspect of my livelihood. I love the language, I love the traditions, I love that it's protocols exist because, again, you know, it speaks to these key things. If I use genealogy as an example, there is nothing in my culture that can condone anyone from severing my genealogical ties to my family. Nobody has the permission ever to do that. So of course my culture is always going to be keeping me connected to my family, whether some people choose to be on the more religious and conservative side and decide that they don't want me as a family member, but that's okay, because they're colonized and
We all know what happens to a colonized mind, eh, Auntie?
that's right, absolutely. And that's not a bad thing. So yeah, I love my culture. I think it's a very affirming part of me, and I love the fact that there are other cultures similarly to mine that I embrace and I affirm and I'm a part of, such as Samoan, Tongan, Te Ao Māori, you know, and they're very they're things that keep you grounded and honest, and aligned to ensuring that, you know, you treat others how you expect to be treated, and that's what your culture affirms. You know, your service to people is, if this is a service that you give and that's how you treat people, it's always going to be reciprocal, and that's what I love about our culture. It's constantly this reciprocal aspect of people. You do good, you treat good, you get good and be treated good back in return.
Yeah. So centering.
Yeah. Answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thumbs up. We got a thumbs up. I'm going to move into more of the present time that we live in. You are a homeowner.
I am.
How? Like
COVID. Thank you, COVID.
COVID. Okay. Well, I guess because I may be speaking out of school here, but a lot of trans women would struggle to even fathom being able to own a home. How did this work for you?
Don't know. It just happened. COVID was. I don't think I would be. If COVID wasn't a thing, I probably would never own a home. Banks became very strategic of who they wanted to target. They dropped down, their requirements to be a homeowner because they were desperate. So what you don't see in the home is obviously my partner, who's not here. He had to return back to India because his father passed away. So him and myself brought together, and it's a lot of sacrifices and struggles over the years, and I just think he was the person that just said, we just need to try. Let's just give it a go. And we were declined by my bank, believe it or not. But it was a process, it was a journey, and I know that I'm in a very privileged position to be owning a home. But sometimes I feel that it was just so much more easier renting.
Okay. See, I rent.
You got to grow up, you got to pay rates, you got to pay insurance, you got to, when you rent, you just pay the rent, and
that's exactly it.
The poor landlord has to deal with everything else. And I do say poor landlord because some landlords are really, really good people, and some are just assholes. And I rented my whole life. My father, when I lived on Tona Street, my mother had a Housing New Zealand home, and my father smashed that place. Like, you could see through every wall, stand at one side of the house and look through the wall, and you could see right to the other house, because he basically smashed every wall, every window. So my mother was blacklisted from ever having a Housing New Zealand home, and she practically spent her whole life paying off the debt back to repair that house, to now they're busted down the house and built big apartment complex. And I thought, my poor mother. So we rented all these years since I was like, I don't know, 6 years old. So 40, almost 40 years of renting. And that just was my reality. But being a homeowner, I don't know. I'm conflicted. Like, you don't see any of my pictures hanging on the wall except for that very one, because I still feel like there's going to be a home inspection where the landlord's going to be coming to check the house. And I don't want to put holes in the wall. Those things. But those are those sticky things. So I'm still kind of feeling like, after renting so long, it's kind of just doesn't feel like it's home yet, because it kind of hasn't sunken in. Like, I feel really weird about it. But what's been really useful for me is imparting on the knowledge and that I've learned through climbing through these loopholes. Like, if you're going to buy a home, try not to do it yourself. Just get a mortgage broker. It doesn't cost you money, but just make sure they're really damn good mortgage broker. And I was really fortunate that I stumbled across a mortgage company, because I was working with a mortgage broker prior. She was a older Pākehā woman, bless her that this doesn't make the cut, but she just was really slow, and she just operated on paper-based type stuff, and she, like, it would take a week for her to respond, or 2 weeks to respond. And then we actually just came out here, and there was a real estate agent. He was just like, have you got a mortgage broker? I was like, yeah, but she takes like a week or two. He was like, say no more. Here, contact these people. And this company are just like young people who understand money. Like, they know how money works today. And everything was just online. Like, they verified documents for you. They advised you what to do. And honestly, I came here, and like within 6 weeks I was a homeowner. It happened that quick. From getting declined from the bank to then taking me to a second tier finance company, and they're like, don't worry, you're going to pay 8% interest on your mortgage, but that's okay, we're only going to stay with them for 6 months just to get a foot through the door. And after 6 months, we then picked up another bank who obviously were just like, yes, we'll give you a mortgage, we'll take over your mortgage and what have you not. So it was a process, but I love the fact that I've like all of these things that I've learned along the way, I've passed on to other people, I've connected other people, and now they're homeowners. So, you know,
I'm coming to you.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Because this is a beautiful house.
And it's not me. I'm recognizing that there are a number of people involved in supporting us to become a homeowner, and this is a kainga ora home. First home, so it's not a kainga ora Housing New Zealand home, it's a first home buyer's home. So this whole development area, you've got the $1.5 million homes at the back here, GJ Gardner, stone wood homes, whatever they're called, and then you've got first home buyer homes, and then you've got some Housing New Zealand homes on just sort of, so the new development areas are a mixture of premium homes, market homes, first home buyer homes, and kainga ora homes, which is great because everyone benefits from it. So for us, having purchased a first home buyer's home, we benefit from having these expensive homes right next to us because it offers us more value, and what have you not. So I just learned heaps of things along the way, and I think that's the one great thing about owning a home is that I'm able to impart my experience onto others, and it's been an aspiration of what I'm trying to tie into my work within the organisation that I run, to empower other people, to get them to be thinking about how they grow an income, thinking about a saving strategy, a number of different things. Things that I never understood money. I just thought if you put, $50 or $20 away every week, that eventually it would equate to not enough for a home, but something.
A trip.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think just that concept of over the years, working community, you don't make a lot of money, but I'm very fortunate that I've been involved in some other big projects globally, that I've able to position myself as a consultant or an advisor, and to be paid additional on top of what I make. And then having a partner helps because 2 incomes is better than 1. And then also supportive family and my old boss, who, it took a village to kind of support me.
If you could try and define what you think your generation is and where you sort of fit in, I know that's a difficult question, but give it a go.
I'm the lost generation. Well, because we've lost so many. I guess I mean, if I like to, I don't know, I feel like I'm kind of in this generation where we've lost so many people, so I refer to it as the lost generation because so many people my age only lived to their late 20s or early 30s as a result of many things, mental health, alcohol addiction, violent relationships, prejudice, suicide. So how I define my generation, I don't think there are too many of my peers around. I'm either in this space of I'm not older in the outer generations, and I'm not in the younger generations. Hence why I'm probably auntie. And Auntie Fee is a name that was gifted to me by the community, and I kind of had a strategy behind ensuring that I was an auntie because one, I want to make sure that I can still give you back to your parents at the end of the day. And 2, I think it's important to recognize that you do have a mother. And I'm not that. So always remembering, you have one mother. For some, they have many. But in terms of generation, how do I define my generation? I'm a generation of lots of survivors. And I guess we survive many different things across all the generations, but that's just how I define it. A lot of great, amazing people who I acknowledge and recognize in my journey through their mentorship, through their sistership, through them just being a presence in this world who are no longer with us. And I imagine what life would be like with them if they were still here today. and how much better off my generation would probably be if there were more of us. And again, it's not just my generation in terms of trans people, it's the gay brothers that we grew up with who a number of were affected by HIV AIDS and didn't live long enough to carry on with their journeys. And also we grew up in a time and an era where the digital platform was not a thing. Support services were not a thing. And often when something impacted in our community, it was very difficult for us to actually understand what was happening because we couldn't type it in or get an alert on our phone, or like in mobilizing our community took a lot of effort. People had to turn up physically. You had to catch a bus from one side of town, and probably multiple buses, to get to a point to be in a community setting where they were talking about an issue. So yeah, that's my generation, sort of coming out of the dark ages of lighting fires and smoke signals and tapping coconut wireless to connect with each other, versus sort of coming into that space of bubbling, lots of things happening, but also trying to survive amongst all these other things that were becoming new or arriving on our shores and impacting on our people's health and well-being.
So you are the link between the elders and us. Well, us. I don't know where I place myself in that, which kind of is representative in the mahi that you do with the business that you work for. Are you able to elaborate more on the job that you do?
Sure. So it's a charitable trust I'm the executive director for. It's called Whene Pasifika Aotearoa Trust. It was co-founded by myself and the formidable, amazing Mama Tere Tahiri Strickland, who was a great mentor to me. She was formidable for being a very staunch Māori kuki airani, whakawahine, trans woman activist who walked between both te ao Māori and kuki airani peoples and Pacific peoples, to be really fearless and unapologetic in her positionality around a whole raft of issues, not just related to trans, but all peoples, elderly, disabled, young children, across a raft of a number of issues. So it took a real holistic approach to her activism. She was very clear that we didn't live single issued lives, that there are a number of things that if you wanted to address one thing, you had to look at a whole bunch of other things. So yeah, I think about her a lot in terms of the work because she helped guide it. But Whene Pasifika Aotearoa Trust is a charitable entity that serves the interests and the needs of Pasifika LGBTQIA+, MVPFAFF+, rainbow and queer peoples, and their whānau in the Tāmaki region, the Auckland region. And we work across, we're a whānau order provider, so our approach is obviously centred in the whānau order approach, where we work across the domains of education, culture, community leadership, employment, financial literacy or money management, debt reduction, and health and well-being. And yeah, we're based in Manukau. We work Auckland-wide, and yeah, we've been around since 2009 when the idea was, the seed was planted. Unfortunately, Mama Tere passed away in 2013, and I felt a deep sense of responsibility to carry on this vision of hers and the journey, and to support wherever. And I think it's also connected for me as an individual, that promise I made to myself as a little kid to work towards establishing something so that a younger version of me was never seeking blindly or aimlessly, seeking for support. And then what comes of that, obviously, it's been 1993. Let's do the math. How long have I been doing this work?
2023?
Yeah, 2023 takeaway.
30 years.
1993. Oh, so yeah, it would be so from voluntary work to paid work, to serving the community. It would be, I would probably say 28 years, maybe 27, 28. Almost 30. So I've been doing it since a very young age, and it's been a long time.
Yeah.
I've tried to leave. I keep getting pulled back.
When was the last time you tried to?
So I work for the New Zealand AIDS Foundation, which is the Burnett Foundation today.
Yes.
And I left to go live in Australia, and I was there for just under a year, and they pulled me back. And I've been here ever since.
Just can't live without you, aren't you?
But I'm guided by that spirit. And I think the community have a big part of their desires to keep key people involved in this work. So something always, I keep saying to trust in the process, trust in what guides you. Don't switch yourself off to those listeners much. And I tried to go down this path of being a real estate agent because, I want to sell houses and make money too. And unfortunately that wasn't the case. And so now I'm still here working in community. But as a result of this work, it's taken me all over the world. I'm also the co-chairperson of the Asia Pacific Transgender Network, which is an organisation based in Bangkok, Thailand. We work with 24 country partners in progressing trans health and trans rights across the region with those partners. I've been on that board since 2015. It's probably time for me to step off soon to encourage younger leadership or new leadership, because, you have to recognise within yourself that you can't sit in these positions forever. Unfortunately, what makes it hard with this work is that not everybody wants to do this work because everybody wants to be Beyonce.
That was very pointed.
But Beyonce's a great beacon to aspire to.
Yeah.
And I would never ever dampen anyone's aspirations if that was the pinnacle of their desires to achieve in the world based on Beyonce.
I know
And
what you mean.
look at her. She just broken, the most awarded Grammy winner in history, and just recognizing that again, I don't say that in a demeaning way, but just saying that not everybody wants to stay centered in pursuing trans rights or trans activism as a career pathway.
Yeah.
But for me, I want to share with as many young people, and I have 2 trans women working within my organization who see the value in service to others, but also what it can do in terms of fulfilling you as a person, but also the leadership development that it also provides for you. So, just this small community practitioner and worker has taken me right through to the United Nations, both in New York and Geneva, multiple times, at many different platforms, and supporting and working and lobbying with many other trans and LGBTQIA plus rainbow activists all over the world to support them in their efforts at the highest level to ensure that our rights are not diminished, and that there is a sense of recognizing that trans people too are worthy of becoming homeowners, business owners, academics, scientists, mothers, fathers, and that they can be loved during that whole process of aspiration. So it's very rewarding.
Whenever I think of you, Auntie, I think of strong advocate for the community, a homeowner, a strong, hard-working woman. When do you get a chance to just relax? And how do you avoid being burnt out all the time? Because I feel like we all view you as just this woman who's always on the go. Like, do you get a chance to cater to yourself? Cater to you,
Beyonce song. Well, I don't know. I think when you've been through everything in your life, from the point of almost being murdered to being because I was a sex worker for half my life and been in very, very, very dangerous predicaments where, been amongst some very nasty men. And understanding that whole element of putting yourself in unsafe spaces and recognizing traumatic experiences as they evolve in your life versus, being really sick as a result of being a sex worker, and then, mentally having to constantly on the daily, hundreds of times in a day, dealing with discrimination, or somebody having something nasty to say about you, having to remain stealth and passable at every aspect of your life is a huge burden on a person's well-being. And I think once you become immune to it, and trans people are so good at reading people and also immune to their own emotions and feelings of well-being, because they deal with such nasty crap on the daily, that I don't know how to answer that. Because I've just become so immune to being burnt out, to being tired, to being dealing with so much that there's nothing that can resolve your sadness or your tiredness or your feeling like this is a never-ending struggle, and you just cope with it. So we all do within everything that we endure in our life. For some it's not easy, and they choose to take other routes in leaving this world, but for a number of us, we just constantly are surviving it on the daily, and it's that survival that just continues to tick over. And I don't know if there's a really healthy analogy to provide you, but I have no other way to explain it other than the fact I don't come home and magically sleep on a cloud and in my bedroom and have a massage chair that I come to, and but then I think about outside of that, I'm very grateful to be blessed with life. So I'm very reflective as a part of something that I can only manage in my well-being, is to reflect, to always take on the advice from my mother, to learn from my mistakes, and that I'm grateful that I still have my mother with me today, which is a key aspect of just switching off and calling, because she doesn't live here. She lives in Niue. She's only here at the moment because she's having her health checks and stuff. But I call her on the daily and have my chats with her, and I think just knowing that she's still here with me kind of reinforces again why I do what I do, as a result of her and her reflection and my grandmother's. And it's just things like that that keep me going. But yeah, there is no secret recipe around.
You just live.
You do. You just get on with it. And if you need to take time out for yourself, just recognize that you need to. I will tell myself, sorry, there's no meeting today. Chill out at home. Take some time off. We've had a busy week. So I've, in my work, in the organization and the values that we stand by, I guess I've inserted key things within our organization that is not aligned to the corporate way of work hard constantly like a rat, or if you're unwell you got to take a sick day, or for me and my team it's just like, if you're not feeling it today, stay at home, just take leave, and that's because the work is hard. So it's just recognizing that those things are key aspects of a person's life, and in order for them to be the best possible example of being a good supportive worker, that I just need to be reflective in my work and provide my staff and my team the space to be able to just recline on the chair and watch TV. Sometimes it's just that. And sometimes it is just making sure that you get some sleep.
Yeah.
Drink water.
Breathe.
Breathe. Exactly. Breathe.
Breathe, because another one will come eventually.
Yeah, and then I think recently Milo, his new addition to the family, has brought me another level of sanity.
How long have you had Milo?
So Milo will be...
Sorry, just going to interrupt you. Just a stray hairs come out from the back. It's showing up. Yes, on the right side. Yeah.
Am I here?
Yeah. It's just popped out for a second. Excuse me, interrupting. Yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful.
And then having the addition, Mr. Little Milo, it's spelled M-Y-L-O. So it stands for My Little One. So the M-Y is mine, L-O is little one.
He's a ball of energy.
He is. He's a ball of energy, and he's kind of, when I get in that predicament of just thinking I'm just going to come home and not move and not function, I recognize that that's not good for your body. Moving and being active and not being stationary for too long as you age is not a good thing. Yeah. So Milo's kind of just like, oh my gosh, I gotta get up and play. I remember seeing this meme somewhere, and it had a dog and a person sitting on a couch, and the dog was sitting there, and at the bottom of it said, you're an asshole if you can't sacrifice 20 minutes a day to be with your pet. Or to play with your pet, something like that. So every time I looking at Milo, Milo's like bringing his toy and coming and dropping it on me, I just always reflect on that meme thinking, I'm not that asshole. And yeah, it's just, he kind of, reawakens this, won a world netball champion. I've competed in Premier Women's Division of Wakaama and been in the top 3 clubs for paddling, so I was always a very sporty person, and I think I got into a point where I do feel like I'm getting tired, but he's kind of become this new ball of energy that just keeps me on my toes, which I love. So yeah, just shouting out to our fur babies and our pet babies that bring this new sense of activeness to our aging lives.
Your responsibility to them is so rewarding because they are living their best lives.
They are hard, and they gift so much. I don't think I've laughed so much in such a long time as a result of Milo. He just makes me laugh with some of this, the funniest things that he does as a little, doggy. But yeah, it just gets to a point, it's just like, gosh, I haven't laughed that much in ages. Even my mum, see my mum laugh, and she's like active as a result of babysitting him. And I said, he's going to his dog sitter in February, because I'm going to World Pride. And even though she's going to be here, I said, you need some time away. She's like, no, don't take him. I'm going to be lonely. I'm going to be like, so I think, okay. But I do know if I do take him away, Mum will probably spend 20 hours of the day on Candy Crush or on Facebook watching Netflix. So he keeps her a bit, gets her off the bed to be like, come on, Nana, let's go for a walk downstairs. And that's kind of like what he brings me. So, yeah.
What are some fun things that you and your mother do?
Well, we weave. So, my grandmother was a master weaver, and because my mum came here at a younger age, my mother's a very good weaver, but she learned very basic stuff. She never got to weave to the mastery skills my grandmother possessed, and my grandmother didn't actually pass it on to anyone else in our family. So we've been kind of on this aspiration of weaving different things, and I'm a costume maker as a result of my dancing background. So being involved in beauty pageants, I have made costumes and won awards as a result of using that as something to pass time and also a hobby. And so it's just reconnecting, reclaiming, and I guess using that as a way to remember the practice of lalanga. But we do that. We paint fabric. We talk about a whole bunch of stuff. My mother was pinnacle in my master's journey, where I used weaving as an analogy for a communication tool, and the concept of lalanga niwe to be a process that allows people to have difficult conversations through using weaving as the stepping stones to having those conversations in a safe way, but guided by the practice of lalanga or weaving.
Okay.
And yeah, we like to go shopping, just like any other
As
mother and
we all
daughter,
do, yes.
and just generally gossip.
Oh gosh, I think well, for those that don't know, because you were the one that coined the term, and rightly so, could you please explain the abbreviation and what that means?
Sure. MVPFAFF is a mnemonic, so it's a sequence of letters that actually refer to cultural terms, and MVPFAFF stands for Mahu, Whakasalewa, Palopa, Whawhawhine or Whaatama, Whakawhiwhine, Akawaine, and Whakaleiti or Leiti. And the plus acknowledges that there are 22 Pacific Island cultures and that there are many other terminologies that exist, but those 7 letters were aligned more so to the prominent Pacific ethnic communities in Aotearoa.
Yeah.
And it was a reminder to remind people that the LGBTQIA plus framework, or this concept of rainbow, does not necessarily fit in the indigenous or the cultural framing of identity terms that people are known by within respective Pacific cultures. And although some of us use those terms in duality, depending on where we live, depending on where we were brought up, some of us, like myself, I use whakawhiwhine first and foremost, because that is the cultural term that I identify with in Wangahau Niue, the Niuean language. But I also identify with being a trans woman, and that's aligned to my transition, to some of my social experiences living in a Western context, but also the political aspect of my work. And so MVPFAFF recognises, or was basically put forward at the Asia Pacific Out Games in Wellington in 2011, basically to say to the people that were there, because the activists, Pacific activists that were there at the time, there were about 50 of us, every single one of us that had a workshop or a presentation, like the only people that were turning up to those workshops or presentations were ourselves, or the 1 or 2 Pākehā funders that funded them to be there. And we found that quite problematic, because the 500 people that attended that conference, it was more appeasing to them to turn up to the big research focused projects or presentations, or the respected doctor, academic type, and anything to do with the Pacific Rainbow community, talking about things that were pertinent to them and their experiences in their countries. It wasn't of interest to people. And then also because they kept labeling or referencing that everybody that in that space was from the rainbow or the LGBTQIA plus community. And we found that problematic, considering a number of us identified as whakawhine, akawaine, wakasalewa. So when somebody says that and you're coming from the Pacific context, it's kind of like, oh, yeah, I'm not that first, I'm this first.
Yeah.
And you need to recognize that, and we need to have a conversation about that. So it was kind of the first positioning moment where I coined that mnemonic, but also that it recognized that we needed to be having more expansive conversations around ensuring that when we reflected on umbrella terms, that if you didn't see yourself in those umbrella terms, or you didn't identify with them because you identified with something culturally, that there needed to be a process to unpack that or to acknowledge it. And I also recognize that MVPFAFF Plus was not a replacement of the LGBTQIA plus. It never intended to be that. But people, as they do, have taken it and used it. This is the MVPFAFF Plus community. It's like, no, that's not correct. These are a whole bunch of different communities that exist within the ethnic specific groupings. And that's what you need to recognize, is that, again...
If you're going to use it, use it.
Yeah, but also recognizing that we come from cultures, and like I am tangata Niue, you are tangata Māori, somebody's tangata Samoa. Like if you're going to be having a conversation with them, know them as the person who, first and foremost. I always say to people, if you want to know me, my name is Phylesha and I'm tangata Niue. Like, oh, what does that mean? But you're a trans woman. Like, no, let's forget about that first.
Yeah.
Let's focus on the fact that I'm Niuan, and you need to know that first before you need to know anything about me.
Yeah.
And that's about being culturally competent. It's about being culturally safe. It's about acknowledging a person's genealogy. It's about acknowledging a person's peoples, and many other things. And again, also recognizing that the universal rainbow symbol was created by, is it Nigel Baker? Can't remember his name. Gilbert Baker, Nigel Baker, can't remember. So he was challenged by Harvey Milk to come up with a universal symbol that would be representative of all the LGBTQIA plus peoples in the world. And so he did, and he came up with the rainbow. Now, I'm pretty sure this person didn't know what a whawhawhine was, or didn't know what a whaatama, what a whakawhiwhine, or what a takatapui or whakawahine was or existed in this world. So he came up with the symbol of the rainbow. Now, in Niue, the rainbow is symbolic of our most ancient and revered god, Tangaloa. Our people believe that that is where Tangaloa resided. So every time the rainbow appeared in the skies, our people would always put their heads to the ground and never look directly into the rainbow. And they believed that if they looked directly into the rainbow, because they were disrespecting the god, that it would bring a bad omen to their crops, or something bad would happen in their family. So, and then in Samoa, the rainbow is the symbol for people living with disabilities. In Hawaii, they have their own, they're the rainbow state, but their cultural beliefs of a rainbow means something different to them as a people as well. So in indigenous communities, the rainbow means different things.
And it rainbow community that doesn't,
to our people, and this is, it's nuanced, it's problematic to the point that when your people are kind of like, what do you mean you're from the rainbow community? Like, are you from Tangaloa's community, or are you from the people living with disabilities community? Because that's what our people believe the rainbow to be, or be symbolic of. And it's the same thing with having conversations about LGBTQI plus, like trans. What do you mean you're trans? What does that mean? Like, it becomes problematic because they kind of see you as an other, rather than seeing you as us. So when you use words that are so this basically was to practitioners or human rights defenders. When you use words that are relevant to us, that we identify with, it's useful for our people to know who you're speaking about, because they're like, oh yes, our whawhawhine community, blah 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 blah. Then you're like, oh, the gay community, oh no, we don't support the gays, we're religious people, we don't, it's kind of that kind of thing. So that's kind of how, long story long, how MVPFAFF Plus came about. But it just recognises that there are other cultural terms that people identify with as identity terms outside of LGBTQIA plus, rainbow or queer.
And more thorough.
Could you just, on your right hand side, just flick your hair back a bit? It's just covering your face. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Don't be sorry. That's what we're here for.
Thank you, Auntie. Right. Was there anything that you wanted to?
There's a few things. Just, and this is not for salacious purposes, but I'm really interested. Really interested to know how you talked about your teenage years, and then you mentioned later on about becoming a sex worker, and you've just had all these experiences in your life, and I'm just wondering if you could, if it's possible, like briefly just take us through from when you were a teen and how you landed up, becoming a sex worker, and how from there you become a hugely respected human rights advocate. Like, just paint a picture of these different experiences that you've been through in your life.
So, talking about going to that nightclub for the first time ever, obviously I was exposed to nightclubs earlier than that. So at the age of 15, on K Road, which is now known as the Studio, it used to be, it was Auckland's, I actually think it was New Zealand's first ever, no, it was New Zealand's largest gay nightclub, and it was called DTM's, Don't Tell Mama. And it was huge. It was like 4 levels of clubs and bars and dance floors, and it was a place that everybody went to. And my first cousin, he was a head bouncer at the nightclub. And right up on the top level, on the 4th level, upstairs, where they kind of had this chill out lounge that kind of looked over as you walked out. It had a big glass window and you walked out. It looked right down across all the nightclub. And upstairs was where people came to just kind of chill out, mostly making out and having sex. But there was a little cafeteria there, and my cousin, who was a head bouncer, he got the opportunity to run the cafe and make a bit of money on the side. And it was just frying chips and making nachos and toasted sandwiches. And it was a part of their requirement, I think, to be open during a certain hour. They had to have an eatery or something. So he asked me, he came to ask my mum actually, and I was 14, just turning 15. I think it was because I was 4th form and I weighed practically half the year. So it was like hanging out at my older sister's house, doing nothing. And he came and asked my mother. My mother was like, yes, go and work. So I went and started working within that nightclub. So I got exposed to seeing some of the most beautiful trans women, like, who were so well put together, who were like Amazons, who were just like wearing the latest fashion, and they would always have these most gorgeous men attached to them. And you know, as a young person, like, you're always like, oh my gosh, I want a boyfriend. Oh my gosh, I'm so attracted to so and so and so and so. You know, it's puberty and everything that comes with that. So in my head, I was just like, oh my gosh, who are these women? Like, what the hell? Like, why they're so lucky. So eventually I worked out that these women were sex workers. So I was just like, in my head as a young kid, I automatically assumed, like, if that's where you go to find, you know, your perfect husband, basically. And so eventually, after working as a young kid in that nightclub, the nightclub, I think, eventually closed down after a while, and I left it because I got more interested in dancing. And dancing became, as a cultural entertainer, became a very prominent space in my time. And as a result of that, you know, you go out as a performer and you dance within a number of groups that I was dancing with, and then you'd go out with your girlfriends and you'd get drunk and you'd be in nightclubs. And so again, the nightclub industry was just like, you know, that's where you went to go and find your tane, to hook up and feel amazing and feel great. And, you know, that was a moment in time that I think was probably a big waste of time, because, you know, there's more things to life than men, right? But that's just me as a young person. And then eventually I realized, you know, I need to be on the streets. I need to find these men that are going to be my sugar daddies or my husband to be. And I wanted that gorgeous husband that I saw all these other amazing trans women with. And so sex work became a part of my life. And thankfully it did, because some of the greatest lessons that I've ever learned in life have been as a result of sex work. I learned how to negotiate, I learned how to manage, I learned how to take care of myself, safety. I knew how to read some very seedy people. I learned how to, because it was still illegal to be a sex worker at that time, so every single person I came past, I always had this spiel where I would say, and this is where, you know, probably the early underpinnings of advocating for your rights came apart, because I would always be like, any person that stopped and said to me, hi, how much? My first response would be to them, are you a member of the New Zealand Police? Because it was illegal for them to entrap you. If they asked if that you're a member of the New Zealand Police, they had to respond with yes. If they said no, it's a form of entrapment. So, you know, I started to unpack all of these things as a sex worker. And of course, I worked out very quickly that a lot of these gorgeous men that were connected to some of these amazing, beautiful trans women were often either drug peddlers, or they were receiving drugs from these trans women. And I realized it wasn't the space to be. So I quickly changed sex work into being something that I aspired to find the perfect husband, to being a way to be able to support myself and my family. And even though my family and myself never really talked about me being a sex worker, I think they kind of knew. But I made sure that the money I made turned into not only benefiting me, but also my family. And, you know, I'm not saying that I paid for my younger siblings' school, but it definitely contributed to, you know, our contribution to other family-related events. It contributed to paying rent and power bills and phone bills and petrol in the car, and it allowed me to have a level of freedom to be able to still be a dancer and to still be okay. But I learned many great life lessons as a result of being a sex worker, and also the sense of, again, the support systems that my sisters and myself provided to each other, in terms of just being, you know, hanging out at each other's house on a Sunday and cooking food and just reflecting on the week and sharing notes and information about different people. And it was also a way to just talk about things like drugs and alcohol use. And yeah, just to kind of, you know, being in the nightlife and being out at night was a safe time for a number of us, because during the day, like, that's when people would see your baho, or they'd be like, ooh, look at that, that's a man. And that's often moments when you left your home during the day that you would experience a lot of the negativity, but where at nighttime you just looked like amazing Amazonian queen. I mean, don't even know what the hell an Amazonian queen is, but like a beautiful coloured person who just glowed at night because the night filter was the thing that made you look that particular way.
These roles, I'm assuming you would have had to have learnt the hard way and done yourself into situations that were incredibly unsafe.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, how do you protect yourself in those times?
Well, you don't, and I think this is where instinct plays a part. You know, I just think of particular times where I just think, if I didn't use my common sense and got out of situations, most likely this person was going to do something very bad to me. And you just have to trust your instinct. And I think that's, you know, this concept of three hearts: your brain, your heart, and your gut. If all of them are aligned and telling you ding ding ding, red flags, alarm bells, you trust it, and you don't just go with it because he's a gorgeous looking guy. He's going to cause you harm because of, you know, he doesn't, for whatever reason. But yeah, I learned a lot of things around survival, and again, they're attributes that make me who I am today. As much as I'm a very respected human rights activist, I'm also a very well respected sex worker. And you know, anything I do in my life, I'm not ashamed of. I'm not ever going to say that's something I should never have done. But it's not for everybody, and it's changed. Sex work is it's still a part of some people's lives, but it's not as prominent anymore, because the digital age, new technologies have changed the way that people engage. Well, but so an example is that you wouldn't be standing on the streets as a sex worker. There are not as many sex workers standing out on the streets anymore, because most likely they'll be in their homes on a cam. And they make money from that. So there are new, different ways of doing that. But you know, it also exposed me to sex work protections and rights and understanding those things. people would often say, how could you have put your body, did you disrespected your body in that way? Sex work is not a form of employment. Just like, well, hang on a minute here. And so, just countering some of those examples that people like to force and label onto sex workers was just another time and era in my life that I learnt how to counteract and describe how those experiences were affirming and protective to me, but in the same sense talk about the risks that came with doing it, because it wasn't for everybody. And I think there became a point where being a sex worker turned to trying to get others off the street and to find, other avenues for employment or for making money for them. Because it's not something that you can maintain over a long period of time. And it's a very hard form of work to be involved in, and it takes a toll on you mentally and physically.
It's so true, because we are so close to the street, if you ever think about it, because finding work, which is why it's such a necessity to have you in all of our lives, because you are hiring us. You said you have a team of 2 trans women that are helping you with the business. We're always just one mishap away from the street. That's the way I see it, because you could be doing what you're doing one day and then it's completely gone the next. But it wasn't necessarily a choice for you to go do it, but it was something that helped and supports you in a way.
I mean, ultimately my immaturity misled me to obviously being a sex worker. I'm not denying the fact that, it wasn't good to me, because it absolutely was. But it was also really, really unkind and really bad to me in the same breath. But I mean, I hear people who are reformed sex workers who say some of the worst things about it, and that's absolutely, their right to do so. But I would never, ever, ever talk down sex work, because sex work provided me with the form of income that I could never have gotten, and I had applied for jobs. Don't get me wrong, I was just like still, applying for jobs, still trying to get work, and unfortunately at those point in times nobody wanted to hire a trans woman. And I'm not saying that today equally it's easier and more acceptable, but there's this inclusiveness that lots of companies are holding themselves account to. And a part of that process is ensuring that if a trans woman applies for a job, that they're looking at her potential, but also her experience and the skills that she brings to the role, rather than just
hired, rather than just not being hired at all.
And also, it's easier today to change your photo identification. Should you present it, or to legally change your name, because often they're asking for your name, your legal name, and what have you not. So of course, having to use dead names on an application because you didn't have any documentation to say that your preferred. Well, but I mean that's the reality. Like they just look at the application and be like, no. And you were required to send in like a copy of your passport for some jobs, depending on which job you applied for, or photo identification of some time, and often would have your dead name on them. They'd look at it and be like, what the hell is this? So you wouldn't ever be considered for a role. And it's not saying that it's still perfect today. It's still problematic. I mean, our organisation in Bangkok tested this, where they sent out 1,000 I think it was, applications, and targeted them specifically on being either trans male, trans woman applications, and then tracked how many responses these applications got, how many were declined, how many got no responses, versus the same applications that they sent in that had cis male-female applications and how many responses that got, and they tested it.
Yeah.
And it's still evident today that trans people still find it very difficult to become employed.
Yeah.
And that's again just this stigma or stereotyping that exists, unfortunately, today, where people are not very accepting of trans people. And it's still not hard for trans people to find partners, because
Girl, don't get me started.
but you know, it's again that whole stigma that exists within society where, you know, it's not acceptable for men to be in love with trans women.
Yeah.
We're starting to see some amazing examples of that globally, of very prominent trans women in open relationships with men, but it's again at no, like, it's still undercover. And as much as you might meet the perfect guy, he will always say that he can't be publicly involved with you for ultimate reason, for obvious reasons, whether it be family, whether it be a fear of being ostracized or shamed, or and nobody anybody should be entitled to love whoever it is they want to love, and society should embrace it and accept it, regardless. And I think that leads on to so much more in terms of making things just better for everybody. But unfortunately, we're living through some very trying times where the color of your skin is problematic. Your age is problematic. Your disability is problematic. Whether you go to church or not is problematic. It's really interesting how conservatism is redefining how we've progressed so much over the last 20 years, to almost taking us back into the dark ages. It's really scary. And that's just the reality of the burden of acceptance and non-acceptance.
Was there any particular moment in time with the sex work that made you go, was it one time that made you ultimately go, that's enough?
No.
It just was.
Yeah, I just got really busy with doing this work eventually. Because I couldn't get a job anywhere else. And it was the only way for me to make money. So unless, you know, community work became my thing and I got employed to do community work, if I didn't have that, I'd probably still be doing it. I don't, and I had to co-found an organization to carve out a new way of working, a new form of commitment to our people, and not to be the example of what has existed in the past, because it's never worked for us. And if I didn't do it, and if Mama Tere didn't do it with me, there'd still be nothing today. Or we'd still be trying to break boundaries on the peripheral of the, you know, the swamp, basically, just trying to get a toe into the water, and just rely on other people breaking those ceilings for us that don't even live in our context, that don't even live in our reality. But yeah, there was never any moment in my time that I thought, you know, I needed to get out, because ultimately at some point I thought that was going to be the rest of my life. And, you know, in reflection of it, the representation of strong leadership in women like my grandmother, and my mother, like, those are the moments in time that I was like, they would never approve of me doing this. And how dare I, you know, be doing this, knowing very well that that was never reality for them, yet they managed to survive through probably even worse times in their life, through famine. My mother was born in a grass hut on a mud floor. You know, that's that's the world she came into.
Yeah.
I was born in a hospital on a bed. But my grandmother prior to that, and just thinking about, you know, all those examples, and I think probably those are the moments that I reflected on, thinking, this is not what I should be doing, but I had no choice.
Yeah.
And people are like, yes, you had every choice. You could have become this, you could have stayed in school, you could have da-da-da-da-da-da. But again,
Your
shoulda, coulda,
experience-
woulda,
Yeah, your
and
experience is your experience.
exactly,
Yeah.
and that's the context. Don't compare me to anybody else's example or story or journey, because my context is my context. Your context is your context. Your privilege is your privilege. Your exposure is your exposure. Your connections, your relationships, your networks are your networks. Doesn't mean that they're going to be the same for me. And you know, even still to this day in leadership, like, I mean, I have a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit signed by Queen Elizabeth sitting over there. But, you know, somebody said to me, I spoke to my mum about this. I was like, oh, I'm not too sure I'm going to accept this because, you know, the colonizer and... And I've seen some very prominent people that I admire in their leadership who have not accepted it. But my mother was just like, well, this is important to us in our family. It's important to recognize other people in our family and our people, to recognize your contribution to your work. I would encourage you to take it. And people were like, oh, it's going to open up so many doors for you, and like it was going to become this magic key to something, but
Yeah,
it's
your
afforded.
ticket to Hogwarts.
I mean, it's just a piece of paper in a frame, but it's provided me with nothing. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
And to be honest with you, it's your work.
Yeah, exactly. And
It's
I
your
always
work
say,
that provides you
let-
with the elevation.
thank
Yeah.
you, and let the work speak for itself.
Yeah.
That's the biggest accolade that anybody can ever offer or gift another person, is just talking about the work, the support they provided them.
Yeah.
And for me, that's all that matters. Like, if I'm doing a shit job, tell me I'm doing a shit job, and I won't do that job anymore.
Yeah.
But it's never been the example. It's never been the example for me, because everybody has had something to say in terms of how my support has supported them in some way, and that for me is the biggest accolade that I could receive above a Queen's honour. But recognizing that, you know, it took key leaders to recognise my work as well. So I don't want to trample on their mana and also their acknowledgement of the work. But the work would never have been possible without the people that I serve. So always at the end of the day, it's about acknowledging them. So yeah, I mean, again, it's all contextual. It's always what I say. You can't, like, people talk about frameworks and pathways to care, talking about pathway, you know, support services, and pigeoning it so that it becomes this one size fits all demographic. I'm like, you can't do that. You're like, why not? Everybody's like journey. I was like, you keep talking about everybody's journey being the same or everybody's story being the same. It's not. It's similar, but it's not the same. There's not one other, like, you're a carbon copy of your own self. Your footprint is your footprint. Your journey is your journey. Nobody else in this world experiences what you experience, and that's why you've got to take the time to sit with the person, to understand what it is you need to support, and then just tailor it according to what you know to support them through that process. So yeah, I think I'm just speaking around circles around the question, but it is all about that. It's about seeing the person, the person.
Yeah.
And I think that was my struggle, is that sex work often kept me in a position of, one, receiving an income, but because so many people never saw me as a person.
Yeah.
You need money to survive.
Yeah.
I mean, so many people that say that money's not important, but I wish I could, you know, have my own fale on a piece of land and coconut trees and taro plantation and the sea that I could jump in on my canoe and go and live off
Yeah.
the sea like my mother and my stepfather do today. But you can't do that here.
No.
And they do it with little to no money, but you still need money in order to survive. Like, sex work for me was life-saving.
Yeah. Nothing comes free here,
No,
particularly here
I agree.
in Tamaki.
Yeah. It's not cheap.
It's the struggle. Yeah.
It is. I mean, even just being a homeowner, you think it's like, oh, yay. Of course, you're building equity in the fact that you're paying off a mortgage to eventually, pay it off and sell it and hopefully make money. But it's a long-term investment and it's a long-term strategy, but it's not easy. You've got rates, you've got insurance, you've got the upkeep of the home, you've got more things to consider than you would just renting a property. But, and same as renting, you still have to pay for things and you need money.
Yeah.
You need money to survive.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. How important is it for families to support kids who identify as trans?
Oh, it's absolutely important. I mean,
Yeah.
and I don't think it's just kids, because we often, when we stay centered in this question around kids,
Right.
like my journey, it was important for my mother to be that pillar for me because I was a kid that knew very early that I was not the stereotypical male or female, cis male or cis female. I knew was absolutely different. My mother was, that pillar for me in that journey and finding myself or her being that vision of divine femininity and womanhood that I wanted to aspire to be. But we forget also that not everybody transitions as a child.
Yes, you're right.
Some people transition midlife, as a young adult. Some people transition as a 30, 40-year-old. Some people transition in their 50s and 60s and their 70s. So it's important to recognize that family is integral and important, from whether a young kid is acknowledging that they're not male or they're not female, and that they're in some way, communicating that there is some trans aspect of them, whether it be a trans girl or a trans boy or a trans woman or a trans man, and that needs to be acknowledged, that family plays an integral role to provide people with unconditional love, because once they provide that love, it doesn't matter how a person journeys, as long as they know that they've got that foundation of love and supportive family members, that their journey becomes better, that their transition is affirming, that their journey is affirming, because they know that they have the connection with family, they have love from their family. But it is about also understanding that it's not just the individual journeying, the family journeys too.
Yeah.
So we recognize that, when transition occurs for a young trans kid or a trans person at any age through life, that people around them journey with them, without them taking time to understand whether they feel like they've lost something.
Yeah.
And
that's what I was saying. Like, I think it's important to grieve the loss of that person, but to move on
because
and live with the...
it's that cycle of some people feel they've lost something, but they don't stay grounded in the fact that they're gaining also.
Yeah.
And so it's again that balance of ensuring. And so I always say, when we're having conversations with families, understand that at any point, any one of your family members can transition, not just as a kid, but any age throughout a person's life, and it's important to acknowledge and recognize that. But why is it important, particularly to support young people, kids in particular? Is because we know from research, we know from data, research in particular, not data, because there's not very much of it, that if families are supportive of young people in the decision and the affirming decision making that they're wishing to make at that point in time, it's probably going to be the most beneficial for their adult life in terms of them journeying in a more positive pathway, rather than family suppressing a young person and then they go through puberty and they become adults and they're left with all these scars of bodies becoming not particularly how they wanted them to be, and then having to consider surgery to alter things, going through a life journey of having to remove body hair, which can be a scar to a lot of trans women in particular, and so on and so on and so on. So just knowing that, you know, if you support a young child in the earliest stages, that it's most beneficial also to their health and their well-being, but also their mental health as they journey throughout life. And of course there are a lot of people that are out there saying all these other things, because most of the conversations I have with parents who have young children who are identifying as trans is that there are so many people fixated on one case study, you know, which is one case study in a million trans people or something like that, that this young person took a journey and decided to revert. Like, there's been a number of people in our community that have transitioned, reverted back to their gender at birth, transitioned, reverted back to their gender at birth. And again, it's all contextual, but at the end of the day, they finally found themselves. And that's the moment in time that we need to recognize that there's always going to be pain and hurt, and it's not going to be smooth sailing for everybody. There's always going to be bumps. It's just like the sea. It's never calm. There's always waves, and that's symbolic of a person's journey. That the tides, the currents, the waves, the elements, those are all synonymous to a person's journey in life, provided you have the know-how to navigate, to work within your surroundings and your environment. That's fundamental and key. So that analogy is used within family, but also an individual. Work together.
It's a smooth running waka.
That's right. Yeah, because everybody needs to be paddling in the same direction.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Do you think things are better now for trans people than in the past? I've heard tell that, again, don't quote me, I'm paraphrasing, but your idea of that is that we have come away, but it's been a slow process. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I reflect on, I think, a kōrero I presented at the NZEI Te Reuroa, which is the Union for Primary School Teachers, their national hui and taupo. And I expressed that my experiences as a young child, signifying that I in some way am, or seeking that I was not cis male, is probably a lot worse today.
Yes.
Because nobody was having conversations about medication. Nobody was having conversations about pathways of care. Nobody was having conversations about harmful, being trans and medicine is a harmful practice. Everybody has an opinion today, and there are so many people that are making it problematic for a young person to transition today. This is why I say it's worse, because I as a kid didn't have to contend with it. I just had to contend with ego and conservative adults. I think what we're fundamentally forgetting here is adults are often the problem who cause the worst problems for children. And if you're not placing a child at the center, if you're not listening to a child, and you're not allowing a child to be the decision maker ultimately in their journey, that again is problematic. And I just feel that there are too many barriers today and too many things that people are opposing because it aligns to their conservative ways of being, and because they believe that being that we're supporting, we're being harmful, we're promoting a ideology that is aligned to some form of extremism, that it goes against the fabric of Christianity, using all of these excuses today that just constantly oppose any recognition or any dignity to trans children, to trans young people, to trans young adults, to trans adults, to trans elderly people. It's an absolute disregard consistently today. And a lot of this is fueled again by global North American stupid conservatism that continues to insert itself within our our own fabric of evolution as a society, which I think is becoming very, very problematic. I mean, we're already starting to see these nonsense type legislation, but also the strategy that they're deploying from evangelical Christian entities who are asserting themselves in board trustees to outnumber other board trustees and removing them, and talking about giving money to teachers so that they stop teaching critical race theory or progressive health and well-being. Like, it's so problematic. That's why I don't think that it's any better today. If anything, I think it's getting worse. And again, I'm just sick and tired of trans people being a smokescreen for politics. I'm sick, and it's not trans people that are creating all the fuck-ups in this world.
Yeah.
It's the conservative, corporate, greedy assholes who just continue to disregard people's livelihoods and use misinformation and spread disinformation, but used marginalized communities, in particular trans people, to be the focal point for them to reference as why conservatives or religious people should deny people their rights. And my fight to that is, there is no, like, if you're a Christian, I'm raised in the church, PIC Newton hard, but if you're a Christian and you're a professional, i.e. a politician, like, leave your freaking religious values at the door. Like, use your common sense, use your political will, not your religious will, to guide what makes the decisions. Don't infiltrate your religious values and beliefs to be the defining factor that contributes to your decision to go against trans people or oppose trans people's rights or oppose access to health for trans people or to oppose a bully policy or legislation, because not everybody's Christian. And I think people need to consistently recognize that again, these things are becoming more and more and more and more problematic. It wasn't so obvious then as a kid for me, like the problems that young trans kids are having to contend with, or just what trans people are having to contend with today. It's different in the art sector. It's different in the performing arts sector, where those sectors have definitely are enabling and providing platforms, or key trans people within those sectors are breaking down barriers, are smashing ceilings in order to assert themselves, because they're so talented and well respected with their craft in those sectors. But we're just, when it comes to school, when it comes to health, when it comes to employment, when it comes to lessening experiences of discrimination today, it's so much harder, and a lot of it's got to do with the day and age that we live in. Social media has a huge contribution to finding ways to demonize or to vilify transgender people on so many different examples. And there are so many dumb people out there that continually buy into it and again promote it. It's easy just to keep pressing a button, and sometimes I just think that government should ban social media for a number of reasons. But I also see the value in social media for many things, education-wise, and accessing to see what amazing things people do in this world. So yeah, it's a hard time. It does. It's a hard time to be living as a trans person, because there's so much exposure to so much. And again, we've had more allies than we've ever had before, but sometimes our allies can be problematic. Because they want to be the trans ally spokesperson of all trans issues without understanding lived experience of trans people. And I mean, again, it's it's a hard one. It's a hard one to answer. Then, other than the fact that I still think it's shit to be a trans young person today than it was back in my day. At least today there are some support services that people can access. There is a lot more access to information. Parents are becoming, I can't remember having to have dealt with, I mean, not that it doesn't happen, but it's not as often that I'm seeing trans young people excluded or ostracized from the home. That was quite evident in my upbringing with peers, but not so much today. Normally you're running away from home is not actually running away and living on the streets. Of course some people it is, but running away today often is running away from mum and dad to auntie and uncle or cousin, or in terms of what I'm experiencing with people that I support. But it is, I think it's still harder.
Describe a perfect world.
Describe a perfect world. Oh, it's so hard to.
For us.
That's so hard to fathom. Oh, less hate, because hate's always going to exist. We all hate in some way, shape, or form. I don't know. That's so hard to. I think the perfect world for me, and I'm not going to say, the perfect world for me is living back on my motherland, in my home, growing my own food, living off the land, and not being subservient to the machine of capitalism and commercialization and materialism, and just living a basic life like my grandmother and my mother lived. I think that describes the perfect world for me. And being surrounded by the people that love you, without colonization being a part of that, or without any type of nization being an aspect of anybody's life, and that we live to be an example of our own standards, and not standards created as a result of an institution purporting that this is the way to be, and this is what you should believe in, and that relationships are upheld as an important aspect of genuine connection and commitment to ensuring that if I'm well, you're well, and if you're well, others are well. And that world peace.
Always. Honestly, I feel like with people like you on our side, and so many other people before and after you, that's possible. Completely.
Yeah.
Completely.
And mental health is a key attribute to many people's struggle. Just trying to fit in, or just trying to be, or to see themselves as through others, or to aspire to be a particular way. And the more we become immersed in thinking that, I need this and I need that, and I'm reliant on this and I'm reliant on that, and it's important for me to have, and she has it and he has it and I want it. Like, that's part of the problem. Whereas, living within your means and just being happy with what you have, without anybody saying to, oh look, she's wearing a dress that she had 10 years ago and she's still wearing it. Like, who gives a stuff? Like, not caring about what other people have to say. And that's why I say less hate, less judgment. I think that for me is a perfect world. But then nothing's perfect, right? A dolphin could be living in the perfect space in this world, but a shark might come and attack it and it's over. But that's the vicious cycle of life, right?
We'll always be challenged. I guess that's what
Yeah.
makes us human.
And then I guess it's a part of our evolution of evolving as human beings. But in saying that, not everything should be a rat race. Not everything should be dependent. And I think, a perfect world is where you absolutely feel true sovereignty, true autonomy, true self-sufficiency, and that you're not confined to parameters or boundaries or legislation, and that, works or operates against you. And that you're just confined in your own space, in your own world, and just wanting to be peaceful and live and nurture and develop others to be great examples of what their ancestors were or what their ancestors wanted for them.
Looking at your entire journey to where you are now, what has been the most difficult thing that you've had to go through?
Aging, I guess.
Can't live forever, can we?
Well, no, you can't. But I mean, the expectation, people set so much expectation on you without you asking for it. So they set those expectations, become standards or become the benchmark. And as you age, people then start to remove those expectations or those benchmarks because they want someone else to. So it's again, as you age, you become more irrelevant. And it's kind of like becoming irrelevant is, for many people when they age, is a very lonely journey because it starts to isolate a person. And it's a sad predicament. And nobody should, this scenario of expectation and standards and benchmarks, get rid of it. Everybody is relevant. Everybody is contributing. Everybody is, regardless of the age. Age doesn't define what you achieve in this world. You can be achieving pure inner peace at the age of 75. You could be the scientist that cures cancer at the age of 25. So again, just not being confined to thinking that because you are no longer at your peak or your pinnacle, that you've got nothing to contribute. Some of the greatest people I know in the trans world are in their 60s and 70s. And I'm so grateful for the fact that they're still here in my lifetime, that I can still listen to their stories and their journeys and be reminded of the calmness that they are living in their elderly life, and be reminded that that's a thing to aspire to, and that they're still relevant to me, that they're still in some way, shape or form have meaning to who they are for just living and being, and that the connections that we have amongst one another is important. So I think, aging is a very difficult aspect of my life, and of course because I'm getting tired more frequently and can't, because it does take a toll on your body. Anything takes a toll on your body, whether you're doing the work that I do, whether you're a labourer in a factory and you've done it for the last 30 years, whether you've been a truck driver for the last 20 years. Eventually something's going to take a toll on your body. So that's probably the hard, and the reason why it's difficult too, because I imagine trans people don't, my journey, my contribution of late has been reminding trans people to live long lives. Don't think that life ends at 30 or 40. Continue to live to your 90, aspire to reach your 90. But it's hard for me as well at the age of 47 next week to be thinking of life at 67. No, my mum won't be here. Yeah.
In your journey, what are the things you're most proud of? And please list as many as you want.
Gosh, what am I most proud of? Just being a good human being. Yeah. Being a good human being, I think, is the thing that I'm most proud of. It's just, that in general. There's nothing else I can I can say that I'm, like I said, everything comes as an accolade because of people and people that I've connected to and people that have bestowed me things. But, you know, if I wasn't a good human being, then none of those things would be possible. So everything that I've achieved in life and everything that I've been the example of has been because I've been raised by good human beings. Yeah, and that's what I'm most proud of, being. I'm not the perfect human being, but I'm proud of being a good human being.
What makes you hopeful for the future, for us?
That we live longer lives, that if you are a trans woman and you want to be a mother, be a mother. If you want to be a trans woman and you want to be in love with another woman, whether she be a cis woman or a lesbian, fall in love with a woman. Whether you're a trans woman and you fall in love with a gay man and he loves you back, do it. If you want to be a trans woman and, you know, be the first Prime Minister of this country, do it. And by saying that, I hope that trans people continue to break stereotypes and continue to break standards and expectations of them to conform or be something that everybody expects them to appease being, that they change that and be what it is they want to be. And to be bold and to be courageous and to be strong, to see their value and their contribution just for being alive, being of value to this country, to the world, to someone, and that political leaders who just continue to use trans people as smokescreen no longer are left in positions over years that they've gotten rid of straight away, that they are no longer in positions to continuously oppose, and I think that's anybody in any professional practice, that it is no longer tolerated that they are allowed to minimize trans people, to degrade trans people, to restrict trans people of the things that they rightfully should be afforded, just as any other citizen that is not trans in this country is afforded access, you know, to whatever it is they need. So, you know, I say that very, very strongly as a statement that part of the biggest problem for trans people progressing in terms of the rights, in terms of the accesses, in terms of the access that they should be afforded to services, to resources, to living a life of dignity with respect and without discrimination, fear, prejudice, violence or judgment, is onus on key decision makers who continue to either sit on their hands or do not use their political will to stand up to the many people that continue to oppose or exclude or minimize or vilify trans people. And as much as I want to say all trans people, I have a deep hope for trans women that the world recognizes and sees them as women, and that they don't have to define them consistently as being this other type of woman. So I have many hopes for trans people, but I also recognize the trans contribution to the history of this country, to the world, and that I hope that our allies and that our families and our communities continue to grow with trans people and continue to be strong allies and supporters to support trans people into the future, so that we too can be equal and that so we too can be loved, and that so we too can be the things that we want to be in this world, knowing that we have them alongside us, behind us, and with us always.
I'm in there.